So Red Rooms is a 2023 film, but technically 2024 because I don't count film festival releases as official releases, and when I say it's one of the best of the year, I am so serious. It's a French-Canadian crime thriller that I would say definitely teeters into horror, as it features some of the most sickening and shocking scenes of the year, and what's most impressive about that is it doesn't feature any violence at all. The thing this film does so expertly is its ability to demonstrate real-world evil in such an explicit yet reserved approach. So for context, we're following Kellyanne, a model and sort of professional poker player, as she sits in on the trial of the decade, a triple homicide case about this serial killer who's SA'd, tortured and murdered 3 young girls. Now he did this for Red Rooms on the dark web, which if you didn't know is a kind of urban legend, but they're supposedly these live stream rooms on the dark web that host torture, murder and other sickening things for a paying audience. So your first question when watching this movie may be, why Kellyanne? Why are we following this unrelated person and not anybody directly involved in the trial? Not the court, not the prosecutor, the defense, the killer, the cops, the families? None of them. We view this murder trial from the perspective of a spectator. And we'll get round to answering this question through this video, but when watching the movie, to understand that question and then to answer it yourself is a real task, because this is a film that demands your attention. It does not baby its audience, it does not spoon feed its themes and ideas or resolutions to you, even at the risk of confusing the audience. Even at the risk of having an ending that's incredibly open to interpretation, they are expecting you to do the work, and I respect that highly. It's a movie that believes its audience is smart, and they demand this attention from the get-go. The opening is super somber, and as we move into the first courtroom scene, we go about 17 minutes with very little cuts. The camera just freely moves through this room as we go from perspective to perspective. First of the judge explaining how heinous the topic of this trial is, then the prosecutor, then the defense, and finally to the look of Kellyanne. Now, what I'd like to quickly point out is that the killer in question, Chevalier, is very much killer-like in looks. He's a middle-aged white man, skinny, dark eyes, emotionless, and just has a very sinister look to make you immediately believe in his guilt. But Kellyanne is not the typical look we associate with evil and depravity. She's a young, smartly attired, conventionally attractive, affluent white woman, and I think that is very much intentional. It's a way to demonstrate that not only does evil act out in different ways, it also festers in different vessels. So there's a couple ways this film analyzes evil, and they do it from a couple of perspectives. The first and most surface perspective is that of the killer. The depraved nature of whoever commits these acts are the most obvious and evil in our society. Most blatant and outward evil we see on a day-to-day basis. It's an evil that is easily accessed by anyone who is inclined to embody it, unlike those in governmental positions that choose to sponsor the killing of children in other countries, unlike the millionaires and billionaires and the overall wealthy who oppress the working class and maintain their status through all kinds of wicked means. The role of this brutal serial killer can be taken up by anyone in any situation, which makes it a very terrifying reality that we're all aware of. Then the perspective of a slightly deeper and veiled evil, in this film being the role of Clementine. She's Kellyanne's friend who gets adopted during the trial essentially. The interesting thing about Clementine is that she so strongly believes that Chevalier is innocent and being set up, which is a fine enough conclusion to draw. You know, it's a trial, innocent until proven guilty. She's exercising her right to believe what she wants. But what makes her so specifically interesting is that it goes beyond believing that he's innocent. She constantly bats down any sort of evidence with an excuse, even if it is vague or a huge stretch, because she so strongly wants to believe his innocence rather than actually believing he is. It's like she needs him to be innocent. She doesn't actually care about the trial finding justice. She cares about her theory being right. She cares about this random man so much. But for why? The movie commentates on the groupies, serial killers and convicts gain when they become famous. I mean, the world always loves a criminal they can empathise with, like Gypsy Rose Blanchard, but there's a specific subsection of society that adore these clearly sick and abominable people. They write love letters to Ted Bundy, they fawn over Charles Manson, and I wonder what the overlap is in the groupies who believe in the innocence of their fascinations and those who know otherwise but don't care. Clementine near the end of the movie professes she fell for Chevalier, which is its own kind of social disease, but after hearing the undeniable truth of his guilt, she's working on undoing those emotions. But his guilty verdict doesn't actually seem like the cause of this realization. It was Kellyanne and also her exposure to the crimes directly through the recorded videos. So she now knows he's guilty and no longer wishes to support him, but the fascination in her is why did she so desperately need him to be innocent, and in the end, either way, whichever verdict, why did it matter? Like I said, there is no answer to these questions. The film is not spoon-feeding you anything, it is just showing you these kinds of people and allowing you to come to your conclusion on them and their philosophies, their character. So Clementine isn't exactly evil in the traditional sense, but she does very brazenly defend an obviously guilty child murderer on the news, in the courtroom, through her presence, calling in on a TV show, and is all she talks about. This is obviously deeply affecting the families involved and spreads a dangerous rhetoric, and if it were not for Kellyanne's evil outshining her own, Clementine may have ended up being one of those vicious and dedicated groupies that serial killers gain after infamy. And now the final perspective of evil. Kellyanne herself. She's the protagonist. We've been following her since the beginning and we've wanted to know why. So let's explore that. There's a moment that encapsulates Kellyanne more than any other, and that's when she talks to Clementine about playing poker and she says, "That's what I love, seeing them lose everything." She's talking about finding emotional people and exploiting them for it. Everyone has a breaking point, and seeing them cross that point and lose everything is what brings her satisfaction. She's cold and callous in that way, which explains a lot about her behaviour, which comes across as unempathetic, psychotic even, but it's fueled by nothing but a sick need to win, or rather, to see others lose, and there is a difference. Kellyanne was playing poker with Chevalier this whole movie, and she was also playing poker with Camille's family, Clementine and the police. She plays very well also. In the case of Chevalier, she brought him down. She took what was a fairly unstable Jenga of a defense case and hit it with a tank. He lost, he's guilty. Camille's mother was subjected to seeing her daughter's murder, as well as the constant torture she provides by her sheer presence. The police are given the damning evidence of Chevalier anonymously on a plate. It was so effortless it seems, which makes them look incompetent. Clementine lost, well, everything. Her beliefs, her trust. She seems the most unscathed on the surface, but considering she was the closest to Kellyanne's evil, her turnaround on Chevalier is clearly an indicator that her entire psyche was altered by Kellyanne's presence. Even if you want to look inward, Kellyanne lost her credibility, her photo shoot, her friends, her modelling career, and this is where the distinction between wanting to win and wanting to see others lose comes in. Because she didn't win at all in this situation. Nobody did. The dressing up as Camille in the entire third act was a pure kamikaze mission. It's an evil that Clementine slyly recognized but couldn't fully understand the depths of. Fans have been talking about Kellyanne and her actions in the final scenes, wondering if she was playing a game the whole time to prove Chevalier's guilt, saying she burned everything to see him go down for his crimes, but I can't subscribe to that theory. I can't believe this was some moral mission, because morality seems like something completely antithetical to Kellyanne. Though yes, her actions caused a positive effect on the case, her goals weren't to do good. Her intentions were to hurt all involved, which she did. She wanted to see everyone lose. We talk about doing bad things for the right reasons, but we rarely hear about doing good things for the wrong reasons. Another thing about Kellyanne is how clever the film can be about her her character. Her codename online is Lady of Shalott, which is a reference to the Arthurian lyrical ballad The Lady of Shalott by Alfred Tennyson, and even her computer wallpaper is a painting based on this piece. And this whole thing can go over so many heads, but it's a very important detail and draws so many incredible little parallels. Now, the poem is very large, so I won't read you the entire thing, but the subject of the piece is about a woman named Elaine, also known as Elaine of Astolat, who is cursed with a life in which she can only view the outside world through a mirror, which is already a curiosity. A mirror's one purpose is to reflect that which looks into it, typically yourself, so to have this specific object reflect anything but is very powerful, but it draws comparison to Kellyanne and her computer. She views this case, others' lives, everyone's life, through this screen. It's the only time she seems to be conscious, not to mention the dark web, the red rooms, the videos of the tortures. It's like a reflection of the real world that she or we don't get to see usually. Elaine also lives in a tower where she's confined, and Kellyanne herself lives in a sort of tower, a tall building in which she sees the world go by through her windows. And in the poem where the lady sees Sir Lancelot, a knight, she decides to venture into the world but dies in a boat before making it to her freedom, her body enchanting Lancelot when he comes across it. And to parallel that, Chevalier quite literally translate to horseman, a title closer or equivalent to the English knight. And he does in ways convince Kellyanne to venture into the world, to become more than what she is, and when he finally sees her dressed as Camille, he is in ways enchanted by her. He gives more emotion than we see him give at any given point in the movie, even if it is a simple wave, but alas, by the time this comes around, the Kellyanne from the beginning of the film is dead. There's more details like the AI in her apartment being named after a very famous Arthurian character, Guinevere, and a few more details, but that should be a video in and of itself to dissect because it's just so wealthy with ideas. But the importance and relevance of the poem is that it is a piece about confinement, about deprivation, art and sacrifice, infatuation and its misconception as love. It's a very beautiful, brutal and ultimately tragic piece, which is exactly how I would describe this movie. And there's a couple more things I want to just say aside from the topic at hand, but this film is gorgeously shot, great use of colours to describe every feeling and emotion, the sterile environment of the courtroom matching Kellyanne's apartment, the 1:51 aspect ratio making everything feel so boxed in and restricted. We're trapped in every room with Kellyanne, forced to feel her presence in every sequence, sort of like how Chevalier is boxed in the courtroom, forced to view and hear about all these atrocities from behind a glass, unable to interact. This movie also actually understands the Tor browser and doesn't vilify it, which I think would be an easy decision, but it shows how informed the screenwriters were and the care that was put into this. Even the concept of red rooms is a pretty niche corner of knowledge and a myth to begin with, so it's an interesting basis for the movie to use. There's real hand over the mouth shock moments like when Kellyanne first reveals the Camille outfit she wore to court. And I love how this little moment where the prosecutor talks about the screams of the tapes keeps her up at night, because same, it's visceral and graphic, violent and vile, and yet we see no gore. The implied horror is much stronger than anything they could have shown us. Just knowing the details of what happened to these children and then hearing the audio is genuinely stomach turning and a very well calculated decision on behalf of the filmmakers. I also forgot to mention one more perspective of evil the film taps into, which is yours, ours, mine. The film is making big comments on our obsession with true crime. It feels surrealist at times, very Zawofsky, but I also think a huge part of that is that it's incredibly real. And it's just difficult to process such horrors. We have an inability to really understand and ground these kinds of events in our minds. We consume so much true crime and violence that we're desensitized. So when such things are presented so matter of fact, they seem almost fictitious because there's no way these things could actually exist. It's like discovering the boogeyman actually does live under your bed and you realize that you always kind of knew. It's a phenomenal demonstration and one of the best films of the decade so far in my opinion. But that's just me. Have you seen Red Rooms? If so, what did you think of it? If not, what are you doing here? And whether it's one that analyzes evil from multiple perspectives or not. As always, keep watching movies.